Here, we're going to go over some of the advantages and disadvantages of fixed exchange rate systems. Most of what we'll discuss will apply to all forms of exchange rate systems other than floating exchange rates, but will apply mostly to merged currencies, somewhat to hard pegs, and a little to soft pegs. Let's go over the advantages first. The main advantage gained by employing a policy of pegging or using a merged currency is a stable exchange rate. With a free-floating exchange rate system, there can be wild swings in exchange rates in response to investors' changing views of which country's investments will yield the greatest returns. Large, fast changes in exchange rates can wreak havoc on any entities in the country involved in international trade. A large and sudden depreciation of the domestic currency can make firms, banks, and other investors who have borrowed foreign currencies unable to pay back their loans. A large sudden appreciation can cause those who have lent money with agreements to be paid back in foreign currencies with staggering losses. Banks can fail and businesses can collapse when this happens, potentially inducing a nationwide recession. A stable exchange rate can prevent this sort of calamity from occurring. Because of the risk and uncertainty about what future exchange rates will be, under a floating exchange rate system, firms and investors will alter their activities in a way to hedge against the risk of exchange rates. The lack of certainty about future conditions can hamper overall investment. A fixed exchange rate system reduces this risk, allowing firms and investors greater confidence to act on longer-term plans. However, fixed exchange rate systems also have several disadvantages. First, maintaining a fixed exchange rate limits the ability of the central bank to use monetary policy to address inflation or unemployment. Changes to interest rates and the money supply is one of the mechanisms governments use to maintain soft and hard currency pegs. Higher interest rates increase demand for the domestic currency and causes it to appreciate, while lower interest rates reduce demand and cause depreciation of the domestic currency. Since these monetary tools are used to manage exchange rates, they cannot be used for monetary policy at all with hard pegs, and they can only be used in a limited way with soft pegs. As a result, the ability of a country to employ countercyclical monetary policy to increase the money supply and increase aggregate demand in response to recessions and decrease the money supply and decrease aggregate demands to fight inflation is limited or eliminated. In fact, interventions to maintain exchange rates can cause inflation or unemployment. With a merged currency, the government has no opportunity to employ monetary policy since it has no control over the money supply or interest rates. Greece uses the euro, but it has only a small voice in how the European Central Bank conducts monetary policy. If Greece is in the midst of a deep recession, it might want to employ expansionary monetary policy to stimulate aggregate demand and reduce unemployment. However, if other European countries, like Germany, are not experiencing a recession and are more concerned with controlling inflation, Greece will be unable to use this tool. Maintaining soft and hard currency pegs by direct intervention in the foreign exchange market requires holding large reserves of foreign currency. In order to drive down the value of its own currency if there is upward pressure from other forces, a country must buy and hold other countries' currencies and sell its own. If the central bank needs to prop up the value of its currency because of downward pressure on the exchange rate from other forces, it will need to buy its own currency using foreign currencies, and it must have reserve of foreign currencies to be able to do so. Holding foreign currencies carries an opportunity cost. It can be difficult to maintain a pegged exchange rate. If the central bank runs out of foreign currency reserves, it will be unable to continue to maintain a fixed exchange rate through intervention in the foreign exchange market, and changes in interest rates could result in unacceptable levels of inflation or unemployment. Although currency pegs are intended to stabilize the exchange rate, a soft currency peg can cause significant speculative activity on a currency. With a soft peg, investors will try to anticipate the central bank's actions and react swiftly to news and rumors about what the central bank will do. In some extreme cases, speculation can place extreme pressures on a currency and ultimately force a country to abandon its peg. For example, in the late 1990s, Thailand had pegged its currency to the US dollar. The Thai central bank had to raise interest rates and borrow US dollars to buy its own currency in order to maintain the pegged exchange rate, which overvalued its own currency. The higher interest rates within Thailand caused a recession. Speculators began to think that Thailand would soon have to abandon its peg and exchanged large quantities of Thai currency for US dollars, further reducing demand for the Thai currency and placing further pressure on the exchange rate. Thailand ultimately abandoned its peg and allowed the currency to float. Sometimes, countries consciously peg their currency to another at an exchange rate that they know to be very different from the exchange rate that would result in equilibrium in a floating system. For example, some argue that China deliberately undervalues its currency to make its exports less expensive and therefore more competitive abroad. However, foreign countries can be upset by policies like this, which can lead to economic disputes.